Madrid, 1834. The king is dead, but you, his physician, are summoned for one final, abhorrent duty. Queen Maria Christina's eyes are red-rimmed, but her voice is steel. Her command is not about burial rites or state funeral. It concerns the king's body itself, or more precisely, a single infamous part of it. She orders you to preserve it, to embalm the physical root of Spain's decay. You are to make immortal the king's most grotesque secret. This is the untold story of Ferdinand VII, a ruler whose reign was poisoned from within by a shocking anatomical curse. A personal deformity so extreme it warped his mind, destroyed his marriages, and seeped into the governance of a crumbling empire. But to understand the king's end, we must journey back to the toxic beginning of his bloodline. For centuries, the Spanish monarchy practiced a dangerous game of genetic roulette. Marriages were not about love, but about keeping power and wealth within a close circle. Cousins wed cousins, uncles married nieces. The Habsburg and later Bourbon dynasties were a petri dish for recessive traits, resulting in a litany of physical and mental disorders known as the Habsburg jaw, epilepsy, and profound intellectual disability. Ferdinand, born in October 1784, was a product of this poisoned well. His parents, Charles IV and Maria Luisa, were first cousins. The court at El Escorial was a den of intrigue and humiliation, dominated by the queen's lover, Manuel de Godoy. Young Ferdinand grew up witnessing his father's weakness and his mother's brazen infidelity, lessons in betrayal that he would never forget. But a far more intimate humiliation was taking shape within his own body. As he entered adolescence, court physicians began noting alarming developments. The prince's male anatomy was not developing normally. It was growing, excessively and alarmingly. Whispers slithered through the palace corridors. Servants smirked behind tapestries. Diplomats sent coded reports. The heir to the Spanish throne was becoming an object of morbid fascination and cruel jest. Surviving medical correspondence, long concealed, describes the condition with a mixture of clinical shock and horror. One doctor wrote of a member of such extraordinary length and peculiar curvature that it defies natural proportion. Another compared its bizarre shape to a twisted horn, thick at the head and strangely constricted at the base. In an era where classical ideals favored moderation, Ferdinand was a living grotesque. The psychological impact was catastrophic. Every glance felt like a judgment. Every muffled laugh was surely at his expense. This constant, gnawing shame festered, transforming a potentially mediocre prince into a deeply suspicious and vengeful one. He began to practice cruelty on servants, seeing any minor offense as a deliberate mockery of his unspoken condition. His body made him a prisoner. His birthright promised him the power to become a jailer. The pressing need for an heir forced the issue into the open. By his late teens, a council of royal physicians had to confront the practical realities. Normal conjugal relations, they concluded, would be mechanically impossible and potentially dangerous. Their solution was as pragmatic as it was dehumanizing. Thus began a secret project within the palace workshops. Skilled craftsmen, sworn to secrecy on pain of death, were tasked not with ceremonial armor or fine furniture, but with designing and building specialized marital aids. These included reinforced cushions of specific angles, leather supports, and restraining harnesses, all engineered to facilitate a sexual act that nature had rendered a physiological ordeal. Ferdinand's first marriage was arranged to his cousin, Princess Maria Antonia of Naples and Sicily, in 1802. The young princess arrived in Madrid filled with the romantic fantasies typical of a royal bride. The public wedding was spectacular, a festival of hope for the continuation of the Bourbon line. The private reality was a descent into horror. Historical accounts from ladies-in-waiting and confidential physician notes describe the scene. After the ceremonies, Maria Antonia was prepared by her attendants, unaware of the strange devices being arranged in the bedchamber. When Ferdinand entered and revealed himself, her reaction was one of pure, unadulterated terror. She recoiled, screaming monster, and had to be physically and chemically sedated with laudanum. What followed was less a consummation and more a clinical procedure, supervised by physicians. It was the first of many such grim, scheduled encounters. The marriage became a state-sponsored trauma. Maria Antonia, subjected to these painful and humiliating ordeals, grew addicted to the sedatives used to numb her. Her spirit broke. Twice, she became pregnant, offering fleeting hope. Both times ended in devastating miscarriage. The physical and emotional toll was immense. By 1806, she was a ghostly figure, addicted and broken. She died in 1807 at just 21. Official records cited fever, but the court knew the truth. She had expired from despair, a casualty of a king's biological curse. Ferdinand's grief was conspicuously absent. His primary emotion seemed to be irritation at the failure of his reproductive project. His paranoia, however, deepened. He became convinced his wife's obvious revulsion had been a deliberate act of sabotage. This mindset, seeing personal shame as political conspiracy, would define his future rule. His political reign began in chaos. Forced to abdicate by Napoleon in 1808, he spent years in luxurious captivity in France. Even in exile, his obsession was not with his suffering people, but with securing a new wife. He wrote letters to European courts, a king without a kingdom, preoccupied with his dysfunctional anatomy and the need for an heir. Upon his restoration in 1814, he was greeted as El Deseado, the desired one. The Spanish people, weary of war and French occupation, projected their hopes onto him. They desired a savior. They received a tyrant, one whose personal demons now dictated national policy. Ferdinand swiftly abolished the liberal constitution and unleashed a wave of repression, reviving the Inquisition to root out his enemies. But parallel to this political terror ran his private, relentless quest. His second marriage, to his niece Maria Isabel of Portugal in 1816, was a repeat of the first tragedy, just with a different victim. Isabel was 19 and unprepared. Her wedding night echoed with the same screams. She developed a nervous stutter and would flinch at her husband's approach. Her brief marriage was a chronicle of terror, ending with her death in 1818. Ferdinand, predictably, accused unseen enemies of poisoning her. The palace was now a gilded cage of fear and whispered autopsy reports. By his third marriage, to Maria Josepha of Saxony in 1819, the process had become chillingly systematized. The new queen, older and more pragmatic, approached her duty with a scientist's cold eye. She documented cycles, positions, and outcomes. The humanity had been completely stripped away, replaced by a grim biological experiment. And then a miracle, or so it seemed. Against all odds, Maria Josepha conceived. The court held its breath. After 2 decades of failure, an heir was imminent. The king was ecstatic, yet his paranoia multiplied, fearing plots against the pregnancy. The miracle curdled into nightmare. The queen went into premature labor. The infant, a daughter, died within hours. Maria Josepha succumbed to childbed fever weeks later. Ferdinand's mind broke. He refused to bury the bodies, commanding his physicians to work on reviving them, a macabre vigil that lasted for days amidst the stench of decay. Spain, meanwhile, was hemorrhaging. The American colonies, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, were seizing their independence. The empire built over 3 centuries was evaporating. And where was the king? Locked in his chambers, surrounded by portraits of his dead wives and the blueprints of failed medical devices, obsessed with a curse he could not escape. His final marriage was an open farce. In 1829, he married Maria Cristina of Naples. She was already visibly pregnant. The child, a daughter named Isabella, could not possibly be his. Yet, in his desperate, twisted state, Ferdinand accepted this. He would legitimize another man's child to secure the succession his own body had denied him. His final years were a panorama of pathological suspicion. He had peepholes drilled into his wife's apartments, spending hours as a voyeur to his own life. He employed food tasters who themselves were watched. He trusted no one, seeing spies in every shadow. The king, who felt physically exposed to the world, now made his entire court feel watched, judged, and imperiled. His private shame had metastasized into a national climate of terror. Death came in 1833. The official cause was gout. The truth was exhaustion. A lifetime of physiological frustration, psychological torment, and self-inflicted isolation. And then the autopsy. The procedure, conducted in secret, was the final revelation. The physicians confirmed the staggering dimensions. Reports suggest a length approaching 14 inches, with severe deformities of shape and structure that made normal function impossible. But they found something more poignant and more tragic: evidence of ancient, crude scar tissue. As a tormented young man, Ferdinand had attempted his own amateur surgeries, trying vainly to cut away his shame. The organ itself, preserved in a jar of spirits, along with detailed illustrations and notes, was deemed too dangerous, too shocking for history. It was sealed and sent to the Vatican's secret archives, where it remains, a biological relic of a broken reign. The aftermath was civil war, as factions fought over the succession of his presumed daughter, Isabella II. Spain was left broken, a second-rate power. Ferdinand VII's story is a grim lesson in the intersection of the personal and the political. It reveals how absolute power amplifies personal damage, how a private, biological tragedy can, through the mechanisms of monarchy, escalate into a national catastrophe. His reign was a feedback loop of shame, paranoia, and cruelty. A man trying to conquer a kingdom because he could not conquer his own body. He sought immortality through a dynasty. He achieved a darker form of it, as a case study in how the deepest human vulnerabilities can unravel empires. This hidden history reminds us that the past is often shaped in the most intimate and most hidden of chambers. If you want to explore more of history's forgotten corridors and shocking truths, subscribe to Winds of Thought. Your engagement fuels this journey into the past. So if this story shifted your perspective, please hit the like button. It makes a real difference. And let's connect. Comment below with one word that summarizes Ferdinand VII's reign in your mind.